and be like, all right, what's the sum of their points? And then we go to bluealliance.com, look at the breakdown, and be like, oh yeah, Blue Alliance scored 7 L4s this match. Obviously, it wasn't that game, but and then we'd be like, oh yeah, what did our scouts say? 3 + 2 + 1. Okay, we're missing one. We're off. And this is something that any team can implement for their data validation live. And I would recommend doing that. You just literally have somebody on a phone pull up the Blue Alliance, look at the breakdown, and spot check a couple things. Um, we also in 2020 started doing paperless scouting, so that was our first app. We did Android development, and we used Excel for our visualization, or any equivalent, I guess. Google Sheets and that kind of stuff is all about the same. In 2022, we tried to up our validation data by algorithmically determining who was most likely to have adjusted based on our error. So essentially, what we did is at that time we were automatically now checking versus the field at basically, and seeing how many pieces were scored, how many pieces we actually scouted, and then looking at that difference and applying the difference in a linear algebra way, similar to OPR, where the teams that were scoring more would get more of the credit if we were missing a piece, or more of the credit if we overcounted, so they would get reduced more. Um, it was a bit complicated, and it was all done in sheets at the time, uh, but that was something that we tried in 2022. Also in 2022, we stopped scouting climbs and mobility because the field system does that automatically. Not really automatically. The refs are inputting it, but we haven't done anything with that since then. And that just removes a bunch of fields for us to scout that we are relatively confident in the refs being correct. Now, they're not always correct still, but generally they're way more correct than what our students tend to be. In terms of 2023, we started doing daily validation after scouting for a day. We would take a look at the data, and we would run it through an algorithm where we would just tell us how good our data was. We weren't actually doing any correction on it. The reason why that's useful, even if you aren't doing anything with it, and you just know that, oh yeah, we're approximately like two game pieces wrong per alliance per match, is you can now evaluate your data based on how accurate your data is. So a lot of teams will run into, especially like picking or alliance selections, and they'll look at their data and they're like, all right, well, this team averages 7 game pieces, and this team averages 7.2. And they're like, therefore 7.2 must be better. Absolutely. We're going to pick the team that has the higher average. But very regularly, even just in raw error of the scouts, that is not necessarily going to be true. So we just used it for the ability to kind of look at what scouts were messing up on, and address that in the morning of the next day. And then also when we're looking at pick lists things, when we're looking at averages or numbers, if the teams are within that error, we would kind of say, well, we can't really make a definitive thing based on the numbers, even though maybe they're averaging like one more game piece. Well, we know our error is like 1.5 or whatever. So we know that that's not statistically significant. So we can't definitively say this team is better just based on that data point. In 2023, that was our 2023 off season. We moved away from Excel and went to a web solution for visualizing all of our data, which was a big thing for us. One of the big driving factors there was having live access to data. The prior solution of our strategy people kind of running up to the stands, like copying onto a USB the latest Excel files or whatever, was not an ideal situation. And we kind of wrote a front end and a back end that would facilitate us to be able to kind of, wherever we are through like phone data, just pull up the numbers or pull up what the scouts said about whatever team. And we were able to kind of look at that data, which is a big big improvement for us. And then most recently in 2025, we finally kind of got our live validation to a okay-ish level, I would say, where we were every single match of every single event that we were at this season, barring the off seasons that we just did a week ago, the data has been fully validated. And what I mean by that is we compare all of the sums of basically all the different levels, all the different scoring locations for each auto and teleop. They all add up correctly to what our scouts scouted. So typically, I would say we tend to have like 1 to 2 game pieces off per alliance per match, and those get manually corrected later on, and we'll show you how we do that. But that gives us a lot more confidence in our data when we're making pick lists or advocating for changes with our alliance partners in limbs, that we know that our data is correct or very, very close to correct. Obviously, there are scenarios where the distribution of scoring is not or could be different. You get the same sum, but you don't have the same breakdown of like who scored what. So there's definitely still some errors in that. Our data is not perfect, but we have a very high confidence that we have one of the best data sets for our event when we're in the competition. Okay, so one thing that's kind of important, Waffles has a very different scouting philosophy, I guess, than I would say the majority of teams. We are aggressively minimal in the data that we collect. So a lot of teams will collect um, data that seems that can be useful in certain scenarios, I guess. Generally, our philosophy is like if the team if we can't if we're collecting the data, like it has to be applied to everyone in a general sense. And I have a slide talking about that in a sec, but that's something that we're very tight on. Uh, Scouting should be as easy as possible. The reason why we want it to be easy is the easier it is, the less mistakes you're going to make when you're collecting the data, and the easier it is to train people to be competent. We want to maximize scouting data accuracy. We care way, way, way more about having correct numbers than a broad variety of numbers. I would rather scout only L4s and be correct on them and know nothing about anybody else than scout all of the levels and then be all over the place with the accuracy. At least we know when we're only scouting, like if we were to only scout L4s, which would be crazy, but um, we know that we don't have data or reliability on the L321. But if you do scout it and it's wrong, it's hard to recognize how good your data is, basically. Um, we want to engage our scouts in how we actually use the numbers as much as possible. This is very easy for us to um, send scouts out and they're writing down numbers and they don't really understand the importance of it. So we involve the scouts as much as possible in the strategy and pick list side of things. We also have a very limited scouting role. So we actually only assign 6 scouts to our roles, I guess. And I know a lot of teams are like, wait, you only have 6 scouts the entire event, kind of. So our kind of method is those 6 scouts scout as much as they possibly can or feel that they're capable of. And obviously people are going to get tired. That's unavoidable. And then that's when we'll sub people in. But we don't have any like formal like rotation or structure in that way. It's very much just like these are the 6 scouts and you are like a special role for it. It's exclusive and you get to scout whenever you want. And you also have the influence over the strategy and the pick list where the people who are filling in may have a little bit of influence, but they're not the primary people who are like, okay, which team is better and sorting that kind of thing. So the scouts have a lot more say and than just like typing in numbers or whatever. Okay, we also have a culture that kind of started a couple years ago about comments. Um, this has been one of the best things for the team, to be honest, in engaging the teams. There's a few of the comments up there, but essentially they're encouraged to be as brutal, funny, and descriptive as possible. Um, and we want to make sure that the kids are having fun with it. When kids make really amusing comments, they remember the matches very well. And typically, when we watch those or look at those comments in the database later on, we'll be like, "Man, what is this comment? This is absolutely ridiculous." And then the kid will be, "Oh yeah, I remember that match. That was funny because I made this joke and they did this and that happened or whatever." Um, Generally, we don't share comments outside the team. There's a few examples here that are maybe slightly more mild than what we have. Um, but yeah, we're encouraging them to be honest and funny. But obviously, the content of many of the comments is maybe not definitely not intended to share with other teams. Let's say. As I mentioned before, the scouts are the primary driver for the pick lists, and they're the only ones that are actually at the meeting for the pick list. So they are responsible for that. They have ownership over that, and they realize then what their numbers are actually useful for. Like it impacts their role, and we try and have as much fun as possible. Okay, choosing what to scout, how we do it. Um, Basically, we only scout things during the match if it's relevant to every single team. And so the thing that I like to tell my kids when they're coming up with stuff is like, for this data point, is this a relevant data point to the best team that we could possibly have, like 2056, and the worst team, a box on wheels that can barely move? If the answer is no, we don't scout it, basically. We don't scout climbs or automobility, like I said. There are people historically that have concerns of like, oh, what if the ref gets this wrong? Or sometimes the rules are you'll get a free climb assigned, so you could think that a team can climb when they actually can't. For example, generally we find those concerns to not outweigh the benefits of just not scouting it. So there's definitely going to be weird things, but generally we're going to see, oh, this team climbed once, but they don't have a climber. Oh, they got a free climb, whatever. We're not going to pick them because it's climbed 1 out of 12 matches, anyways. So it's not really a big thing. We don't scout starting positions. Again, this is kind of because it doesn't pass the 2056 and box on wheels thing. We don't really care where 2056 starts in terms of auto. They're going to be running their auto, whatever that is, because it's going to be the best one. If we do care, we do obviously care about starting positions sometimes, but there are like a specific scouting thing. So, like, okay, here are the teams that we're looking at. All right, we have 6 teams that we're interested in. What autos do we care about them? Let's look at their match video or whatever. We don't scout any timing, so no cycle times, no time to climb, no whatever. Again, it's just because we don't care about it from every single team. We do care about it situationally, where, like in 2024, we care about how quickly they're getting to notes or whatever. But that's very specific. Like, all right, let's scout who we're playing against and see how quickly they get to their first note in the midline. Not like the box on wheels who can't do it anyways, and now we have to have that field as either filled out or not filled out, and more things can go wrong. We don't scout misses, once again, for the same kind of reason. We don't really care that much. And we don't scout pickup locations. Okay, now to the actual system, which is a little bit more casual. I'm not actually able to get the screenshot of the app, but I'm going to pass it around slash show what our app does. It's super simple. So we have a starting screen with 2 buttons. Very complicated. We have a settings button and a start scouting. The settings will set the match schedule. So we import our match schedule directly onto the tablet. The reason why we do this is we want to make it as easy as possible for our people to scout the right team and have the right data for the match. So that's not possible for, well, basically every tablet is assigned a driver station in the settings. So you see driver station, this one's set to red 1 right now. we make sure that all of them are filled out, and then it'll just automatically cycle through and pull the right team for that specific match. So we never have any issue of like, oh, we accidentally scouted two of the same team but forgot to scout another team. There's no handover. It says scout name, and then you can import. The scouting match, we have a pregame match number where you can type in the first match number. So normally starts one. Ever since basically once you put it in, it auto increments every single time you go through a match. So there's no like, oh, I set the wrong match number, I was scouting the wrong team, whatever. All good. You can set your scout name, and then we scouted whether or not the person was at the human player station for the human player. I'm just going to set a random match number. So I press match 1, find match. Apparently 188 was in red 1 for Mary Ward 2. And then we have a very simple user interface for our auto and tele-up, which are literally just plus, minus, up and down, nothing crazy, no field diagrams, no anything. So they scored 1 in auto for L4, +1, done, great, auto's done. You can collapse it. Now we go to tele-up, which basically looks the exact same thing. Nothing crazy. Very simple for people to understand. I think I would have liked to have like a visual reef or something to be like to show what L1, L2, L3, etc. is. But very simple. At the end, actually, at any point, there's in the top left corner, we have a comments modal that will pop up. So if you want to write a comment before the match, during the match, after the match, it saves it. So you can type whatever, press done, go back to scouting. Then we submit a match. We use QR codes. Super bulletproof, reliable, able to kind of scan it into our system, and we upload it to the front end stuff. In the case that we have internet issues, we have a save QR code button, which basically just saves a screenshot of the image. So if there's anything that's wrong, we can continue scouting, no problem, and then input the data later. And yeah, that's literally the app. Nothing crazy. We're not fancy in that front. The goal with that is just making it as easy to use as possible. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Are your tablets offline during the event? Like
yes.
In the stands? Yeah.
So we do hotspot for like 5 seconds to load the match schedule, and then they're offline for the rest of the event. And then what we do is we tether to a phone so we have a laptop in the stands that we USB tether, and that shares the data. And basically we'll scan using the laptop webcam, and then press once all the matches are loaded for that, or the data for that match is loaded, it'll push it to the back end, and they'll show up on the website.
Just out of curiosity, what tablets are you using?
They are Lenovo somethings, Android tablets. But we used to use the Kindle Fires. We just upgraded because they also serve a double purpose. We use it for the FLL programming. So we wanted a little bit better tablets, and then yeah.
What is leadership like in the stands? Is there a mentor that's scouting heroes?
Great question. So 2025, we made a little bit of a change in terms of leadership and how we structured how we did things. We're probably going to revert back exclusively because of mentor availability and how many mentors we have coming into 2026. But essentially, leadership wise, we have the 6 scouts who are the primary scouts. They're normally scouting the vast majority of matches. Then we have a lead scout and a lead scout mentor. They are managing the scanning and the system basically. And then we also will talk about the data validation part of things, where they will give semi-live feedback to the scouts if they notice that, hey, you're constantly missing a couple L1s here in the hard to read, like hard to see places, or whatever it ends up being. So our scouts are getting live feedback on like how to improve and how to have better data. So that's a mentor and a student. And then we also last year had a stand strat mentor and student who are responsible. they started making the pick list from match 1, and they would just edit it the entire time. And then when we walk into our pick list meeting at the end of the night, we start with that as the baseline. So we skip a lot of that time-consuming, like, early quick sort kind of stuff where experienced people have already kind of sorted and they have an opinion, but obviously they haven't seen every match, and then we discuss as a strat and scout team. So yeah, that's a student and a mentor.
And also just to follow up.
Yeah.
So I think the use of API and fully for resources is really impressive, and it's a good method to move towards for automation. Given that as we move forward in the years, likely the field will become more and more automated.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wouldn't want to pull from data sources that you'd always want scouts for, or do you eventually think our scouting systems will be completely automated?
I mean, quantitatively, there's nothing that I would hesitate to take from the FMS if they started tomorrow, like somehow knowing L4, L3, L2, and just putting that out on a per team basis. We would just use that. The thing that kind of always has that human element is like the subjective things that people see and the comments and that kind of stuff. The comments tend to be quite detailed and will highlight on a wide variety of things, especially the things that we don't regularly scout for example, the things that I was talking about, like the misses or the time to climb, those kind of things are regular inputs and in comments where somebody will be say, oh yeah, they took about like 10 seconds to climb or whatever, but it's not a mandatory required field.
Are your scouts involved in MatchStrat?
Yeah, so it's kind of a goal that we want to have. In practice, it's really hard to implement because they're busy a lot of the time.
Yeah, they always.
They have a lot of scouting. What does happen occasionally is like, so the stand strat people will talk to the scouts, especially if a match just happened with a partner or an opponent robot that we know that we're going to play with or against recently. They might talk to that team or talk to that scout and be like, "Hey, you just watched this team. We have a match with or against them. What did you notice? We were thinking about them doing X, or we were concerned about them doing Y. What is your feedback in that?" And that's kind of what they would do in terms of match strat. And then the stands strat people typically come up with our preliminary plans for a match. So they'll be looking at the data, and because they're also looking at the list, they're familiar with all the teams. They come up with a preliminary plan, and then that goes to our like pit strat people, who last year was Tegan, and she would take that, adapt it, go talk to all the other teams, etc. Okay, so this is our website. Hopefully it's sort of visible. I might need to zoom in more. Okay. So this is live on, anybody can access it on our team. We do have a sign-in. The sign-in is done through Google OAuth. So our team all has Waffles emails through Google, through G Suite. So we use the Google's domain restrictions, basically. So anybody who has a Waffles email can log into the site and look at the data. Each of them has kind of like user preferences, which are not really detailed right now, but have the potential to get expanded later, where you set your event code for what event you're on and your team affiliation. So we did scout with 7480 for Newmarket. At Champs, we shared with 4039 and Alpha Dogs. We both collaboratively used our system. So team affiliation is used for a couple things. But yeah, that's the settings page. We have I guess I'm just going to kind of walk through things. If you guys have any questions about a specific page or how it works, let me know. We have a teams page, which just lists all the teams at the event, and it has pictures for each team. Some of them have broken since we've last had that. But let me try and find us. So it does support multiple pictures of robots. So when we're going around, we can upload pictures, or if there's a specific mechanism that we want to take a picture of, we can take a picture of. You can delete or star pictures. So if we favorite an image, then it'll show up as the primary picture. So sometimes you take a picture and you realize, oh, I have a better one later or whatever. We can do that. You can also filter by teams. So you can search, want to look at waffles, look at their details. So this is one of our main views for each of the team. We call this like our team view, where we have a summary of the average game pieces, what they do in auto, teleop, end game. P is park, N is nothing. We also have a nice graph for how many game pieces the team is scoring over the course of time. We look at this a lot, to be honest. We have different, basically line of best fits to see if teams are getting better or worse generally for overall game pieces, auto, teleop, etc. And then if you hover over each of the things, it tells you how many they did in each match. At the top, it tells you how many their sum is. You can toggle the trends on and off, but generally we just leave them on. We also just have the raw match data for each team. So this is just like a table view. If we're wanting to like look at something specific, we can do that. We have comments that you can hover over. Our comments on ourselves tend to be very tame or overly positive. But one of the things that we added recently is the ability to exclude specific matches. So hypothetically, we had some say a team has an issue, or like maybe they were playing defense and that's not something that you want them to play or want to count in as their kind of like stats. So we're able to like deselect specific matches, say those 2 matches I didn't want, and then all of these numbers will update based off of that. So there's cases where like, okay, robot broke. We know that they're probably not going to be broken in this specific scenario. What does their numbers look like when they're doing this? Or on the second day, they finally got their vision working and now they're scoring like crazy. All right, let's just remove all the front data and look at the end data. That helps us find teams that aren't necessarily that improve massively or have really big outliers, either in the positive or the negative, and then kind of evaluate them based off of what we believe to be more their true performance. We also have a comments section. We have a few different types of comments. This is actually an example. So we have a question type comment, and basically what that is occasionally, well, not occasionally, pretty regularly, teams will do something on the field that confuses the scouts, or they look broken for some reason, and we want to know why. So scouts are able to input a comment question that goes to the front page of the website, and the pit strat people will basically go around and talk to that team and then fill it out. So I guess in this case, we weren't doing L4s, and the scouts were confused why we weren't doing L4s. And they were asking, was it a lower priority? Tegan responded, yes, it was a lower priority. That's why we weren't doing it. This has been periodically broken throughout our events, so we haven't used as much as we wanted to. But I think it's a really useful tool to be able to evaluate teams and figure out why they broke and that kind of stuff. The other kind of comment we have, which isn't in this one, is anybody can add comments to the page, even if they're not a scout. So we'll regularly have like the pit crew put in a comment where maybe they hear, Team 4476 is looking for Kraken motor to replace their broken thing, and then we'll put that in the scouting data so that we know, okay, they were broken, or they had a really bad match or whatever. Then, we have a comment from the pit crew said that they were looking for a replacement motor. That probably is correlated, and then we have that kind of stuff available. The other thing that we'll do is, especially in the earlier events, we will practice field scout. So we will watch the practice field in the last day typically, and take notes and numbers on what teams are practicing or what they're working on. For example, one of the things that we were looking at was 1241 and their net at at Newmarket, taking numbers on that and just kind of seeing how they were doing and whether or not they were improving. Because oftentimes, especially at earlier events, you'll find teams that are improving massively. Yeah.
How often are you like going through these comments? Like, I imagine it's very specific situation.
Yeah, we look through comments during the pick list, obviously, and then for any matches that we have, we will basically do a quick skim of all of them for sure for each partner and opponent, and then just see what pops up. There's no like specific timeline or anything, and then the pick list people look at it depending on who they're interested in. Okay. So that's kind of the team view. We'll go to our analysis stuff. And this is, I guess, where we'll talk about some of the validation. I'll just pick a random match. As it loads. So this is our match analysis view. This is what we use to validate and then also look at the performance of our team when we just complete a match. So one of the things that we do in our match review process is talk about like how many we scored, was it good, bad, how did our partners perform compared to expectations. If we scroll down, I clicked on the wrong thing. Reload. It has the summary of every team at that match and what our scouts said that they did. So if it loads, we're on hotspot, so it's a bit slow. So say we were, I don't know, I guess team 2708, we scored 2 L1s this match, and then we would be like, all right, great, we did what we thought we did, what we were supposed to do, or we didn't score as many as we should have. So it has the breakdown of every single team. You can edit them for data validation purposes later. We generally don't edit the individual team. What we'd use is the top part of this. So luckily, all of our events, for the most part, have live or basically live upload of video. So we have 2 different options. We have a video button, which will just automatically open up the match video for match review if we see that there's errors, which pretty much every single match there will be some errors. We also have a picture-in-picture mode where we can drag, resize, collapse, and then come back and look at it, filter. We tend to go like 2x speed when we're reviewing. All of this is already validated, so it looks normal. But let's say that one of our scouts said that 2708 did a L4 in match 1, and I'm just going to quickly save. And we might need to refresh just so that it repopulates our stuff. And it's mad. So you'll see that once it comes up here, it's going to say that there's an extra L1 or L4 in auto. Once it loads, and for some reason API is not loading right now. Try again. But basically, as a +1, we know that there's an excess L4. What we would do, wow, the API is just not connecting right now for some reason. Whatever. Yeah, but the problem is it's not pulling the API right now. We connect to first API because it tends to be a little bit faster than TBA, because TBA goes to first API and then publishes it. So we want as live data as possible. Basically, the gist of the data validation is it lists out every single auto, teleop, whatever, the sums, whether it's plus or minus. And then we realize that, okay, so we have an extra L4 in auto, whatever. Normally that takes like 10 seconds to revalidate because you just go to auto, you go 2x speed, you look at whatever alliance you're looking at. Did they actually score the thing? No. Okay, let's just set it to 0 because that's incorrect. And then data gets corrected that way. And we did that for every single match this season. It was definitely a lot harder at champs because we fell behind and we ended up doing like a group session for like an hour and a half, revalidating all of our data. But it's super worth it because you know that your data is good. Okay, event analysis. So a few different things here. This is what we tend to do for general summaries. One of the most, basically all of these are filterable by just clicking on them. So if we're filtering by total pieces, we see this is the Durham event. So Waffles is 15.5, Night Owl says 14.2. But we have all the different end game stats. So D is deep climb, P is park, N is nothing, and then S would be shallow if anybody ever did it. And then it has just all the averages for each of the teams. The other thing that we recently added was a filtering thing. So there are 12 matches that every team plays very regularly. Like I was mentioning, teams will get better or sometimes worse as kind of the event progresses. So what we can do is we can slide to like look at only the last like 3 matches, and now all the data is filtered. So we're only looking at each team's final few matches. And it looks like Waffles didn't really change, but some of the order down here probably would have changed. So especially if you're looking for that team that, especially as a lower alliance, you're looking for a team that's like a little bit riskier. Maybe they haven't had that storied success of like throughout the entire event being really good. Okay, no problem. We noticed that this team is like really popping off after the first day or whenever they fix their issues. And you can do whatever range you want, but typically we tend to look at the most recent matches. When we scroll down to, we also have a comparison that we can pull up. So we will compare the 3 Kingston teams here. We have a few charts there. The main one that we actually will look at is the game pieces over matches. So we see who's scoring the most number of game pieces and how they're doing or getting better. You see 2708 started by scoring none in their first 2 matches, but has been improving a little bit. And then we see 7480 was pretty consistent, but their last match they scored 0. So something probably happened there, and we might want to go talk to them if we were considering them as a partner to see what went wrong. Any questions? Cool. Okay, pick lists. I'm gonna make a random pick list. So we can make pick lists. Basically, we have a pick list manager. And then I will choose the random one that I just made. And basically it has all the teams at the event in a drag and droppable, like rearranging for pick lists. It has stats for their total average auto, teleop, and overall. So we can look at it. The other thing you can add is add comments. So say we really cared about teleop L4s, we can add that there and we can look at their numbers. So it's a really easy way to visualize and kind of sort teams when we're doing pick lists live, because we do pick lists live. And then we'll just, basically rank the teams over the period of the event. The other thing that we do is we have a tier assigned that's new. So we can tier teams. So say DM high voltages we think is a tier 2, 5031 is a tier 1, Waffles definitely bottom tier, 5036 put them up here. But anyways, we go through all these teams, and then when we go back to our list view, they start to show up as a tier, and then we can also sort by tiers as well. So they're automatically sorted. The tier 1s are highest. And then we also have tier sort. So when we're generally comparing teams, there's going to be chunks of teams that we think are in the same level approximately. And so we'll sort the tier 1 teams amongst the tier 1 teams. And generally there's not like a tier 2 team that jumps up to tier 1. So that just helps us kind of break it down into smaller chunks so that they can sort them. And then we look at the overall pick list for later on when we're kind of doing a final check or obviously an alliance selection. So that kind of just happens live. I guess the other thing too is where we can copy other pick lists. So sometimes we'll have like a final-ish pick list or whatever, or like a safe pick list and then a risky pick list, depending on what we need to do. And you don't want to have to like manually copy over everything because the lists are going to be fairly similar. You can copy from other things, or say a student joins the pick list process a little bit later and they want to take whatever our current pick list is and adjust it from them, or a strat person wants to do the same thing. They just copy it from the main list. They get the exact same list, and then they can make their own changes and call it whatever they want. The other thing is we can edit what teams are showing up on it. So sometimes there's specific pick lists, like defense pick list or algae pick list or whatever. You can select which teams actually show up on that list, so you don't have teams that don't have the capabilities or requirements for whatever that list is. In terms of alliance selection, basically we have a view as well that kind of helps us go through our pick list. So we can load whatever pick list we want. So we might have our main pick list here, and then we might change to an algae pick list for a third pick or whatever. Basically it shows us all the available teams here. And then as you fill out teams, say that 2852 was a captain, you put them in an alliance, they're now removed from the pick list and the pick list has been updated. So we'll be looking at this live, basically on the field and off the field, filling this out. It does sync globally as well. So if one person puts it in, it'll show for everybody. And then if we're looking at, so say we're between 2 and 3, we can also click on their number, and it'll open up a smaller instance of their team data. Because one of the things that we realized, didn't have this before, where we were switching tabs too much and it was a big mess. So just being able to click on the pick list, like, oh, let's look at their numbers, let's talk about how they're doing, we can look at their comments or whatever. It's just quick access to their team, especially when we're discussing with other teams and advocating for our pick. So it'd be like, boom, here's our data, here's what we think, this is why we think they're better, etc. And then that just kind of fills out throughout the alliance selection. And as you add more teams, say we add Waffles here, now they're no longer on the list as an available team. Okay, photos. The the web app is able to take a link or upload a photo, or also take a photo. So there's a like drag and drop thing. If you click on the link, you can just add an imgur link. We select what team we want to assign it to, which team is it, or you can take a picture directly on the site. It'll ask you to use a camera, but I'm not going to do that right now. Basically, we want to make it as easy as possible to upload images. We have because of the way that it's set up, we want to have an excess of images. We never don't want to have an image of it. So when we're going around to different teams, it's good to just kind of take a bunch of pictures and upload them all, and whatever, if some of them aren't that good, maybe it does get you a view of something that you care about in the future. So we just make it as easy as possible. We have our planning section. So this is what we typically will use for each of the matches. So obviously all of these are already completed. But basically you can click on one of these matches and it'll pull up the team averages. It will highlight who is the best at whatever aspect on their team. So we see that 9592 is the best processing robot on the Red Alliance with 0.7, and the best L2 with 0.1. Meanwhile, we have C4, who's the best L1, L3, L4 robot. So if we're targeting something specific, not so much in this game, but in a game that has more interaction, like, I don't know, say that L4s, we particularly didn't want people to score L4s, we could target who's their best L4 robot, or maybe this is the only team that's capable of doing L4 on their alliance, and see that easily. The other thing is it does highlight the best averages for each team overall. So we see C4 scores an average of 1.3. I guess this match is not super competitive, unfortunately, but they're the strongest team on their alliance. Waffles 15.5, but we don't score the most L4s. That is 4917, who also does the most auto L1s, which are probably misses the drop into L1. And then we just have a summary at the end that allow us to help figure out what our expected match result here is. So Red Alliance is expected to score 2.2. Blue Alliance scored 26.2. So we're obviously, when we're looking at this match, okay, we're not really that concerned about a loss here. We're trying to maximize RPs. Looking at each of the levels, looks like we have lots of L4. L1 might be a bit of a concern. We want to make sure that we're probably hitting that coral ranking point. In terms of end game, we're expected to 50-50 on the deep climb and 2 parks. So maybe we climb a little bit earlier to make sure we lock in that, because climb might be a bit dicey, and it's probably just one team that's capable of doing that. Probably 49-17. Yeah, they're the only ones. So we might say 49-17. Hey, you want to go climb at 30 seconds? We're not in any danger of losing the match. Let's just make sure we get that ranking point. And this just helps us plan our match. And it also is available for the elimination matches as well. Same kind of thing, exact same layout, though we're not really caring about RP. So we have a data quality page, which takes a little bit to load. So while that loads, because basically what it's doing is it's checking each of the matches for performance. So we have a scout performance, which gives us loose ideas on who's performing well and who's not in terms of accuracy. It's probably going to take a while. But we tend to do this not like live, but like in between days, where we're going to take a look at the data and be like, okay, we're noticing that this person is struggling with L1s and making sure that they're right or whatever. And then we'll talk to them and kind of say, hey, we noticed this. Here's how we can improve. Here's some of the strategies that I use to like be more accurate, that stuff. Gonna take forever. This one actually has a progress bar, but because we're on hotspot, it's probably gonna take forever as well. Error analysis gives us an average game pieces off for each type of score. So if it loads, when it loads, it'll say like, okay, you're off by 1 L4 on average, or 5 L1s on average, or whatever. So this is what we tend to use for when we're doing validation, and we're noticing broad trends across the scouts. So if we notice that, hey, our L1s are pretty bad, part of that is like sight lines and stuff. We definitely saw that happen a lot more, and it is massively slow. Normally it takes like 10 seconds. I'd love to show it, but yeah. Anyways, that shows broad error. So we'll use that to target specific things that maybe the scouts are struggling with. We'll also use it in a reflective way, where after an event we might be like, okay, we know that we're struggling with L1s or whatever it ends up being. Maybe we need to change up the UI. Maybe we need to change up how we're training. How can we improve on that? Yeah.
Last year, a big thing that we had that we noticed by using this was we realized that people had like the numbers, so they were counting L1s as L4s and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
They wanted the event, so we looked at the data.
It wasn't a counting error. It was a bug in the app. But yes, we found we're like, we are terrible at like L1s. Like, why? Like, they said they scored 6 L1s, but they scored 0. Like, what? We can't be that bad. But yeah, that was a bug in the app. It is different because it's just like a sum for the L1s, I think. So we built it fine and didn't have issues with that. I think it was our actual like data collection that flipped one of the numbers. Holy.
When you come in problems like, let's say L1, because it gets so congested, like you almost need to have 2 people in 2 locations to count them all?
We never had 2 different locations. We just kind of dealt with it and then corrected via video. Another common thing for L1 is like a team would miss and then it would be like stuck behind the reef or whatever, and then through bumps or whatever later on during the match it falls into the trough, and then you're like, well, that counts. But tracking that as a scout is like basically impossible. But what is possible is we just data validate it and we're like, oh yeah, this one fell down like 30 seconds later, so we're going to attribute it to that team. Yeah.
When are you doing that, and who is doing that data validation?
Great
You
question.
only have 6 scouts. They're busy.
Yeah.
Who's watching the videos back? And
So
who's
the
doing it?
So the lead scout or scout mentor will be doing that live. What they do is, like I said, we have the data connected to the computer. So in between matches, after like the scanning, they'll go through whatever the next match is, pull up the video, compare, and then correct live as much as possible. Now they're not usually like to the match level updated, because things happen or whatever, but we try and do that as much as possible. And then, as I mentioned at champs, we fell behind pretty aggressively, and then we had like an hour and a half of like just the entire scouting team. Hey, you guys take this match. We'll work up, you work down. We'll take whatever, and then correcting all the numbers.
So a typical event, you like by the end of the day, you're basically caught up.
Yes, for sure.
As long as the videos are being
Yeah.
updated recently.
So the other thing that we do for videos, we didn't do it for Ontario because Ontario was good this year. But if they weren't, we would do this. For champs, we remote into a computer at home and then rehost the stream in a private way so that we can access basically the live stream on YouTube. So we have rewind capability, so it's instant. So we just pull up that stream and validate off of that. Okay, it's like literally taking forever, but whatever. Match errors is the other one that we look at, where it just lists each match, and then look at the numbers that we have issues with for like, okay, match 5, we were off by whatever. And this is how we target validation errors as well. So like match 5, we have an issue. Let's go look at the analysis page, figure out what's going on. I think we have a question. Guest Wi-Fi. This one. I accept. Yeah, question?
I have a question. You mentioned that you only have 6 scouts.
Yep.
Is there some sort of system where you give them breaks, or is there like a backup scout, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So we don't have any official like break schedule or break scouts. What we do is we have a role which we call our topping crew, which is like waffle topping. Uh-oh. Maybe it's loading though still. But basically what they do is they'll supplement whatever they're the supplemental people for our pick crew if we have a specialized question, but also for scouting, where a scout will basically just identify, hey, I need a break. I'm not doing as well. Or maybe one of the things that also happens because we're live validating, we might notice a scout is getting worse and worse, or like, they start to make more and more mistakes. And the lead mentor for the scouting team might be like, hey, we notice you're, having more errors. Just take a break. No big deal. But a lot of the students do end up scouting. Like our average scout probably scouts like 80 to 90% of the matches. So, and I think a lot of that comes to the culture and it being fun, because I think that most teams, that would be insane. For you hearing that, it's like, how do they have that level of attention? But because they're so involved in the process and they're making funny comments and making jokes and whatever, they're just super. They just want to be in it. They want to have as many funny jokes that get brought up in the scouting team when we look at their comments. Oh, who made that comment? Oh, yeah, that's hilarious. Whatever. Yeah, they like putting out good numbers. Well, I don't think that worked, but it was worth a try. Okay, that's most of the site. I don't actually know where it's I think we have like 10 minutes. Any questions about general scouting or the system or how it works? I guess one of the things that I will say, like, that we're trying to implement. Oh, actually, I just remembered. We can go talk about. I'm just going to quickly pull up Waffles. So in terms of data validation, we're kind of always looking to do better. One of the things that we're wanting to implement but haven't is attribute flags, basically. And this goes to pit scouting. So we generally know what a team's capabilities are, or we can ask. And one of the most common sources of error is like really obvious to correct is like, okay, a team scored an L4, but they're literally not capable. There's no way that they could have possibly scored that. And one of our goals, which is half built right now, is where we have attributes of what a robot is able to do. And if they do something that they're not able to do, it flags the system immediately, being like, hey, you said they scored L4, but we don't think they can score L4. And that'll be flagged immediately. Because even though the summing, like I said, is pretty good, if you're off by the same amount or whatever it happens to line up, you're not going to actually see that error. And so this is one of the ways. Another way that I saw another team doing was just looking at standard deviations and flagging anything that was extreme on either end and just saying like, hey, just take a quick look at this. Like you said, 2056 scored 0 game pieces. Is that really true? Like, maybe, but like, let's check into it, or vice versa. The team that doesn't have the scoring mechanism suddenly is dropping a 30 game piece match. Let's take a look into that one as well. So flagging stuff like that is one of the future goals. Visualizing different data is also something that we'd like to improve. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Oh, one. Yep.
What are you using for a database backend, and how have you organized your data to make it easy to change from game to game?
Amazing question. So we use MongoDB as our backend. It's I think it's a little bit more intuitive for some of the students than like a SQL setup. It's a little bit more free flowing and less weird rules. In terms of how we actually have it set up, there's basically arrays that have we pull the data is structured into auto, teleop, and endgame because basically every single game is going to have that. And then what we do is we read the headers of the data for it and use that as our label type. So what we actually end up doing is we just change the backend in the app and what it pushes out. And then as soon as you match that event code, which is also year based, right? It'll automatically shift all of the website to use those new labels of whatever they happen to be within those categories. And then you still have the auto, teleop, endgame kind of structure that exists, but all the headings will change, and then you just use whatever numbers or true, false, etc. Yep.
How much like manual work in terms of like fixing the bugs do you have to do at the second?
Yeah, it kind of depends on how many new things we add. It's we definitely have events or times where there's a lot of weird issues. Like one of the big things that slowed us down at Champs, which we didn't realize, because we use TBA and the first API. Funnily enough, for Worlds, TBA uses the truncated API or the truncated event code of GAL for Galileo, and first API uses full Galileo. So it bricked everything, and we're like, oh no! So we had to make a quick change, which is a bit of a pain in Houston when we don't really have like a good setup for that. Yeah, I would say now that we kind of have most things sorted out, and it's been 2 years of using this system, for the most part we don't have issues like that, but definitely at the beginning for 2024 we were constantly trying to update stuff or weird bugs and that kind of stuff. just, my advice would be keep it as simple as possible, get something working, and then slowly add to it. That way you're not exploding in a stressful situation where you have other things to be worrying about than updating your scouting stuff to actually work. Yeah.
To what extent do you pit scout and what do you pit scout? How much?
Yeah, great question. So we have been a staunch no pit scouting team, I guess, for our inception. We don't typically use any of the. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where we don't care about a lot of the pit scouting questions in the broad sense of every single team. But there are specific things where we will go up to a team and ask that once we kind of recognize that they might be in a specific pick range, right? We might say, hey, do you have this auto? Or, hey, are you able to add weight to be heavier to play defense or whatever? One of the things that I have against pit scouting questions specifically is asking really good teams or really bad teams something that's like a really obvious discussion, or asking a question that's probably not relevant to that team. So you might care a lot about the weight or what kind of drivetrain a defender has. Do we really care about the drivetrain of the weight of 2056 or Dave or 1241? No, we don't care at all. And just having that kind of data just is make work, in my opinion. The thing that we do pit scout is images. So we go around and make sure that we have good images of each robot and kind of put it up. And then I think with this attribute flag, we might be doing more of that going into a non-standard pit scouting, not so much so that we can filter by hey, is the team actually able to score L4 or whatever. It's more for the data validation side. And oftentimes we'll kind of just look at the robot and be like, yes, they are capable of doing this, rather than asking questions that maybe are you can just see by looking at a team. Yep.
Were you guys storing all the images together?
Yeah, so we don't actually store anything. We upload to Imgur and then just link it through that. So technically all the images are public, but we don't really care. Yep.
So I could search this up and start using it.
So you can search up the website. You just won't be able to log in to see the data. Like I said, we have the authentication for any Waffles email. What we did when we were sharing with other teams is we would make them an email and give them access through that. Yep.
Is that something when you talk about sharing data and sharing scouting data? Is that something that going forward, let's say provincials with this so many robots?
Mhm.
Is that something that you see being